If your family ever put food by for winter, and you could not do it today to save your life, sit down, neighbor. I have got something that belongs to you. In 1976, an old man named Everett Starcher of Sinking Springs sat at his kitchen table and told a younger man exactly how to make a ham that would keep on a shelf for a year. He was in his 80s. No refrigerator in the story, no freezer, no vacuum seal. Just a table where mice could not reach, a handful of salt sugar cure worked into the meat with two bare hands, and 1 full month of quiet waiting before the smoke ever touched it. That was the whole thing. And today, most Americans standing in front of a $700 refrigerated meat case could not keep a pork shoulder alive for a week without electricity. But here's the twist. The men and women who could do this were not survivalists. They were your great-grandparents, and they did it every October. What Starcher knew has a name, friend. It is called the Old Mountain Cure. Salt, rest, smoke, breathable wrap, cool hang. One skill, 5 moving parts, and by the time we are done, you will be able to do it yourself. Look at the two people on your screen right now. Bearded man in a brown vest, woman in a head covering and apron. 2 raw red cuts in their hands. A shelf of vacuum-sealed plastic packs sitting behind them like a promise nobody in your family kept. That woman and that man are not from another century. They are from another economy. One where a hog in November fed a family until spring for the price of a bag of salt and an afternoon. That is the stake. Not a hobby, not nostalgia. The ability to feed your household with the power off. And there is one part of this they worked hardest to make you forget. It is the part that does the most work. We will get there. By the time this is over, you will know every step the same way Starcher knew it. The materials, the order, the month of waiting, the smoke, the wrap, the hang. And the one piece the meat case aisle has spent a century making sure you never learned. There are 6 pieces to doing this right. Most people who try it botch it because they miss one. And the piece they buried hardest, the read, knowing by hand when the meat is done, is the piece that turns a nice idea into a skill that actually feeds you. None of this faded because it quit working. The refrigerated meat case industry and the branded cure and pack aisle got rich the day your grandmother put down the salt tub. I will name every piece of that as we go. Before we go on, there's something coming for this country, and the news won't say a word about it till it's already on your doorstep. It comes down to one number, 3 days. That's what the stores hold for you. My grandfather Eli's pantry held a winter, and the difference was never money, it was knowing. I'm Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge, and before Eli died, he made me swear that knowing wouldn't die with me. So I set it down, 904 pages of it in one book, silasmercer.shop, links below. All right, back to it. The first piece is the one everyone underestimates. It is not the smoke, it is not the hang. It is the initial contact between salt and raw meat, done on a surface high enough and clean enough that no rodent, no fly, and no drip of blood ever crosses the wrong way. Picture the old man at the table, sleeves pushed to the elbow, ham lying fat side down like a heavy sleeping thing, hands rubbing salt, sugar, cure into the flesh with the patience of a man who has done this 50 Novembers in a row. Here is what actually happens. You take your fresh ham, or shoulder, or bacon side, the cut matters less than the discipline, and you place it on a clean, flat, elevated surface. Wood, slate, enameled steel. Not the floor, not a table a dog can reach. Fat side down. That is not decoration. Fat side down lets the salt draw moisture up and out through the flesh without pooling underneath and souring the cut. You take Morton Salt Sugar Cure, or an equivalent commercially formulated meat cure sold today, and you work it in with your bare hands. Liberally. That word matters. This is not a sprinkle, this is a rub. Palms flat, pushing cure into every surface of the meat, every fold, every seam where two muscles meet. If there's a cavity in the ham where the H-bone came out, you pack cure into that cavity like you are stuffing a pillow. Then you let it sit, fat side down, 1 full month. Some cuts, a month and a half. That is the whole first stage. Salt, hands, table, time. Salt, hands, table. A month. In that order, every time. This did not slip anybody's mind, friend. Between the first household electric refrigerators reaching the American market in 1913 and the post-war supermarket boom of the late 1940s and 1950s, the entire architecture that made home meat curing ordinary got quietly outcompeted by a refrigerated meat case somebody else paid to fill. The smokehouse in the yard, the salt tub in the pantry, the November hog killing on the calendar. What every rural household could do before, most adults today could not do if the power went out for a week. That is the smoking gun. It was not banned in a courthouse. It was replaced in a warehouse. And the old method never stopped working. Salt and smoke is still the accepted preservation logic in every traditional foodway on earth. Italian, Spanish, Chinese, Southern, Appalachian. The record says it. Starcher said it in 1976. Cured meat, done right, kept for months on a shelf. Kept whole families fed through winters when nobody had a plug in the wall. That is not a museum piece. That is a working technology that got out-marketed. Now the failure mode. Miss this first piece and nothing after it saves you. Undersalt the meat, or skip the cavity, or leave it fat side up so juice pools underneath, and you will grow spoilage from the inside out. No amount of smoke fixes that later. Here's how you do it today. This week, price a fresh whole pork shoulder at your butcher counter and a 1-pound bag of Morton Sugar Cure at your grocery. Read the label. That is the entire shopping list to start. And the next piece, the one right after the rub, is where 9 out of 10 people who try this ruin the whole batch because they think the salt does the work alone. It does not. The bone does. Step 2. The cavity pack. Every ham has a hollow where the H-bone was pulled out, and every bone-in cut has a seam where meat meets bone. That seam is where spoilage begins, always, because it is the deepest part of the cut and the last place salt reaches. Your great-grandmother knew that with her hands. She packed it like she was patching a wall. Here's how you do it. After the surface rub is complete, you take a second handful of cure, heavier than you think you need, and you press it directly into the H-bone cavity and along every visible bone line on the cut. You do not sprinkle it, you pack it. Push cure down into the joint until it stops going in. If the cavity holds a tablespoon, put 2 in. If you can see white bone anywhere on the surface, bury it in cure until you cannot. Then you lay the cut down, cavity facing up so the cure does not fall out, and you leave it. This is the same month of rest as the first piece. The cavity pack rides that same calendar. It does not add time, it adds coverage. You pack the seam, you pack the joint, you pack the hollow where the bone came out. Then you walk away. A month. Eli wrote about this in 1952. My grandfather kept a leather journal for 60 years, and one page, creased soft from being opened every November, reads, "Cavity pack, heavier than the outside, or lose the ham by March." That is the whole entry. 6 words of instruction and a warning. He learned it from his father, who learned it from a man who came over the Blue Ridge in 1868 with a hog in a wagon. Modern food science lands in the same place from a different door. The deepest point of any cut is the last to reach a safe salt concentration, so it needs the heaviest application. Universities call that a diffusion gradient. Eli called it packing the bone. Same knowledge. One was written down in a leather notebook, the other is behind a paywall. Here is the miss. Skip the cavity, get a beautiful surface, and the meat rots from the joint outward while the outside looks fine. You will not know until you cut it. Now, why did most Americans forget the bone line packs? Not a conspiracy, neighbor, just how markets work. The refrigerated meat case did not need you to know it, because a meat case does not need the meat to last 3 months. It needs it to last 3 days between truck and till. The stated reason was hygiene and progress. The actual driver was a supply chain that made money on speed, not shelf life. Nobody forbid you this. It got forgot, because there was no money in you knowing how to do it, and a great deal of money in you paying someone else too. And the third piece, the smoke itself, is where the biggest myth in modern grilling gets in the way of the real work. Pattern break. Everything so far your grandmother could have taught you in an afternoon. Salt, cavity, weight. What is coming next is the piece that got replaced by a $500 chrome smoker with an app. And it is the piece that does the real preservation work, because the smoke is not the flavor. It is the shield. Third piece, the smoke. And here's where the modern outdoor cooking industry has done you the most damage, because they have taught you that smoke is a flavor. It is not. In the old mountain cure, smoke is a preservation layer, a thin, dry, antimicrobial skin the meat wears for the rest of its shelf life. You are not barbecuing anything. You are dressing it in a coat of hardwood. After the month of cure is finished, the meat comes out of the salt, gets rinsed clean of surface cure, and gets hung in a smokehouse or a smoking chamber at low temperature. Cool smoke, not hot flame. Hardwood only. Hickory is the mountain standard. Applewood, cherrywood, oak, all traditional. Never resinous softwood. Never pine. Pine will ruin a ham in one afternoon. The fire is small, smoldering, not roaring. What you want is white-blue smoke drifting up around the meat for hours, sometimes days depending on the size of the cut, until the surface takes on a deep amber color and a dry, slightly tacky rind. Not wet, not black. Amber and dry. Hickory, low, slow, amber rind. If you do not have a smokehouse, a barrel smoker with an offset firebox will do the same work. What matters is the temperature and the wood, not the equipment. Your great-grandfather's smokehouse was 4 cedar walls and a dirt floor. He did not need chrome. The record on this is clear. Every traditional cured meat culture from Parma to the Ozarks converged on the same solution. Cool smoke over hardwood for hours on already cured meat. That convergence is the proof. When 4 continents worth of grandmothers land on the exact same technique with no committee and no textbook, the technique is right. And today, in the specialty aisle, you can buy a paper-wrapped country ham cured this exact way for $40 to $60 a pound. That is what the market charges when the market has to admit the old way is better. Meanwhile, the shelf behind that mountain couple, the one stacked with vacuum-sealed plastic, is what they sell the rest of us at the meat case for a quarter of the price and none of the keeping. Miss point. Hot smoke cooks the meat, and cooked meat spoils. If your fire is high enough to render fat and hit internal temperatures, you are grilling, not curing, and the shelf life collapses back to a few days. Keep the fire small, keep the smoke cool. Watch it. Here's how you do it today. This week, source a bag of hickory chunks, not chips, chunks, at a hardware store. And if you already own a kettle grill, you already own a cool smoker. That is your starter kit. And the next piece, the wrap, is where the modern kitchen aisle has sold you the exact wrong tool. A tool that will guarantee your cured meat rots. Fourth piece, the wrap. Look back at that mountain couple. See the vacuum-sealed clear plastic packs stacked on the shelf? Those are exactly what your great-grandmother would never have used, and the reason is not tradition. It is physics. Cured meat needs to keep breathing after it comes out of the smoke. Plastic traps moisture. Trapped moisture is the end of a ham. Here's the wrap. When the smoke work is done and the surface is dry to the touch, you take the meat and you wrap it first in a clean cotton bed sheet or a length of unbleached muslin, and then you slide the wrapped cut into a cotton feed sack or a heavy muslin bag. Tie it at the neck with cotton twine. Hang it from a hook. That is the whole packaging. No plastic, no cling film, no vacuum seal, no zip bag. The cloth lets the surface continue to lose small amounts of moisture over the coming months, which keeps the salt concentration on the rind high enough to stay hostile to spoilage. Plastic reverses that. Plastic sweats. A ham in a plastic bag in a warm room grows things you do not want. Sheet, sack, twine, hook. That is the wrap. The 1976 record from Starcher spells it out. Old sheet, muslin bag, cotton feed sack. Not a metaphor. That is the literal spec. And here is the counterintuitive vindication. The multi-billion-dollar food preservation aisle in your local grocery. Vacuum sealers, freezer bags, Mylar pouches, sous vide gear, is selling you the opposite of what actually works for cured meat. They sell airtight. The old way sells breathable. Both can preserve food, but only one of them keeps a properly cured ham stable at room temperature for months, and it is not the one they sell you a $400 machine to do. That is the vindication in one line. When the industrial solution and the ancestral solution point in opposite directions, and the ancestral solution has 300 years of families fed as its evidence, the ancestral one is not the one to bet against. They will sell you the $400 vacuum sealer that does it worse. Fine. Believe that if you want. Or you can learn what cost your great-grandmother nothing but an old sheet and an afternoon. And listen, if that machine is already on your counter, friend, that is not on you. They are good at selling. Half the county owns one. That is not a moral failure. That is a marketing budget you were not equipped to fight. Here is how you do it today. Pick up a yard of unbleached muslin at any fabric store for the price of a coffee. That is your wrap. And the next piece, where you actually hang the finished wrapped meat, is where more first-time cures lose a whole year of work than any other single mistake. Second pattern break. Notice something? Every piece of this so far was already sitting in your grandfather's toolkit. Salt from the grocery, wood from the yard, cloth from a sewing box. Not one specialty tool, not one subscription. The whole cure runs on things that were free or nearly free in 1930, and the industry that replaced it needed you to believe it could not. Fifth piece, the hang. This is where the finished, wrapped cut lives, and it is the piece that turns a good cure into a year of food. A ham hung wrong in November is a lost ham by February. A ham hung right in November is still there in July, sliced thin over biscuits at somebody's kitchen table. Here's the hang. You want a space that is cool, ideally between 40 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Dark, dry, and moving air. A spring house, a root cellar, an unheated pantry off a north wall, an old smokehouse standing empty after its smoke work is done. What you do not want is a basement full of humidity, an attic that swings from freezing to 80 degrees, or a garage with a sun-baked wall. You hang the wrap cut from a hook or a nail, off the floor, off the wall, not touching another ham. Air must move around every side of it. A 1/4 inch of airflow beats a foot of shelf. If two hams touch, both hams spoil at the touch point. You will not see it until you smell it. Cool, dark, airy, hooked, not touching. Check on it once a week. Look for weeping cloth, dark spots pressing through the sack, any smell that is not sweet smoke. That is your calendar. The record from every Appalachian smokehouse and every European curing chamber lands on the same numbers. Cool, dark, moving air, and a modern climate-controlled meat locker rented from a specialty processor, a service that quietly exists in every county in America if you know to ask, charges you between $1 and $2 per pound per month to hold your cured meat under those exact conditions. That is what the market charges to replicate what a north-facing pantry did free for 200 years. The knowledge died because there was nothing to sell you. The service exists now because somebody figured out how to charge for it. Miss point. Warm and still is the killer. A closet against a heated interior wall will spoil more hams than any other single mistake in this whole process because the temperature swings and the air never moves. Here is how you do it today. This week, walk your house with a cheap thermometer. Find the coldest interior spot on a north wall that stays under 60 degrees. Note it. That is your hang. It might be a closet. It might be a corner of a basement stairwell. It might be a mudroom. And now, the last piece before the master reveal. The reed. Because a ham you cannot read is a ham you cannot trust. And the reed is the one piece that no thermometer and no app and no seal date has ever been able to replace. Sixth piece. And here we are at the piece I promised you back at the start, the one they buried hardest. This is the reed. This is how you know, standing in front of a hanging ham in the 3rd or 4th month, whether it is done, whether it is safe, and whether it is time to bring it to the kitchen. No probe, no timer, no app, just your hands and your nose. Here is what you look for. First, the hand feel. Press the meat through the sack with the flat of your palm. It should feel firm, not hard like a stone, not soft like fresh flesh, but resistant, the way a well-kneaded loaf of bread pushes back. Give under the palm means it is not ready. Rock hard means it has hung too long and dried too far. Second, the surface. Pull back the sack at one corner. The rind should be dry to the touch, slightly tacky at most, and a deep amber to mahogany color from the smoke. Not wet, not weeping, no white bloom that wipes off greasy. Third, the smell. Bring your nose close. You want sweet smoke, salt, and a clean animal note underneath. What you do not want is sour, ammonia, or anything sharp. Sour is the sound of a ham telling you it lost. Firm, dry, sweet. 3 tells. That is the whole reed. But there is one more layer to the reed. The layer that separates a person who follows a recipe from a person who owns the skill. And I want to walk you into it clean in the reveal. This is the piece Starcher could not teach through a recipe card. And it is the piece no oral history tape could quite capture, because it lives in the hands. It is why the mountain families who could do this were not following instructions. They were reading a ham the way a farmer reads a sky. And the modern replacement for that skill, the plastic seal date printed on the pack behind that mountain couple, was invented specifically because most of us can no longer do the read ourselves. Miss Point. Trust the read, not the calendar. A ham hung in a cool November will be done sooner than a ham hung in a mild December. And only the read will tell you which is which. Here is how you do it today. Nothing. This is the piece you cannot rush and cannot buy. This is the piece where the whole method finishes assembling itself in your own 2 hands. And the moment when it finishes assembling, the moment the 6 pieces become one skill, is where we go next. Come back to Starcher for 1 minute. That old man in Sinking Springs, 80-something years old, walking a younger man through a ham in 1976. He was not sharing a recipe. He was handing off a reed. The month of rest, the cavity pack, the hickory smoke, the muslin, the north wall hang, all of it was set up. The real thing he carried in his hands was the ability to stand in front of a hanging ham in February and know, without a tool, whether his family was about to eat well or lose the winter. That is what he was giving away that day. Nobody wrote the read down. Nobody could. Here is the buried heart. The read is not a checklist. It is a rhythm. Firm, dry, sweet, the 3 tells, but the mountain families who kept their meat alive for centuries knew a 4th. They knew the weight. Every time they walked past a hanging ham, they lifted it once. Just an ounce of pressure with 2 fingers under the sack. A ham loses moisture as it cures, and the hand learns the loss. Week 1, heavy. Week 8, lighter. Week 16, lighter still. When the weight stops changing between 2 weekly checks, the ham is done. That is the read. That is the piece the meat case industry could not sell you because it cannot be printed on a label. And the whole edifice they built, the refrigerated truck, the vacuum pack, the seal date, the shelf behind that couple, the whole edifice depended on you never learning that you already have a scale in your own 2 hands. The plastic on that shelf is not a preservation technology. It is a substitute for a skill. This was never about a ham. It was never about salt or smoke or length of cotton twine. It was about being the man or the woman in your family who does not have to ask permission from a grocery store, a power grid, or supply chain to feed the people they love. That is what the two people in the picture are holding when they hold up those cuts. Not meat, a door back. And when the sign on their picture says "Copy us," that is not a slogan. That is an invitation from a household that never stopped knowing how to do this, to a household that lost the thread and can pick it back up starting this week. You do not have to master all 6 pieces this fall. Do one thing. Next Saturday, walk into your grocery, pick up a 1-pound bag of Morton Sugar Cure. Price a fresh pork shoulder at the butcher counter and put both in your cart. That is the first step. Salt on your shelf, meat in your fridge, table cleared for a Sunday afternoon. That is the whole entry. Your granddad knew this too. Somebody just did not get the chance to pass it down to you. That is what I was here for. And I ran the 6 pieces myself one November. Never regretted an hour of it. Tell me down below, did your grandparents cure their own meat? Was it hams? Was it bacon? Was it something regional I did not name up here on this ridge? Did they do it different in your county? The skill that gets the most comments is the one I go deep on next. A skill that fed families for 300 years, almost gone. Now you are one of the keepers. Next time, the $2 pantry skill that put a whole industry out of business, and the year they made sure you would forget it was ever there. Keep the old ways. They kept